This video will cover the entire preparatory process for screen printing from degreasing to exposure. This is what we call the prepress stage of our operation, and our goal is to actually expose our artwork onto the screen. The first thing we need to do is clean the screen so that when we coat our screen with emulsion, the emulsion will stay on, will stick on, and won't flake off during our press run. It's important to gather your materials beforehand, so make sure you have your degreaser. The degreaser we use is a 20% Dawn to 80% water solution, so pretty easy to work with. You can buy a actual screen degreaser, but I found that the Dawn solution works really well and it's pretty cost effective. Make sure to have a clean scrub brush with a handle, and you can use the garden hose for this. You don't need to use the pressure washer. Start by getting both sides of your screen wet before you actually spray your soap. While I do that, I also spray down my sponge just in case there's any dirt or anything in the sponge that could damage my screen. I then just spray the degreaser just a few times because there's plenty of soap, and the more soap you spray, the longer it takes to clean it off. So now I scrub the screen in a figure-8 motion going from the top to the bottom a few times, and then I'll go from left to right. This will ensure that I've really cleaned the screen of any grime or any grease or ink. I'll repeat this step on the ink side of the screen a few times, going left to right, top to bottom as well. And then once I'm done, I'm going to carefully rinse both sides to get rid of all of the soap suds off the screen and, in particular, the frame. Soap tends to gather at the edges of the frame, so you want to make sure you clean that off really well. Out for any bubbling on or near the center of your screen. If it does bubble, this is the chance to actually hit it again with the degreaser to try to remove it. Those bubbles might be presence of something that's still stuck on your screen that you could try to remove before you proceed with coating your screen with the emulsion. And then go ahead and wash off your sponge and any soap from your screen, and that concludes the first part, which is the degreasing of your screen. And finally, clean the sink of all the materials and put all of your items away, and go ahead and place your screen in front of a fan to dry. I usually take this opportunity to clean the sink of any ink or any materials I see that was left behind. Our shop motto is to leave it better than you found it, so this is a great chance to actually do that. It takes a few minutes, especially if you're waiting for your screen to dry. You may temporarily store the screen next to the washout booth while you're waiting for it to dry. Please allow it to dry for at least 45 minutes. Do not rush this part. And now we move towards coating our screens with a photosensitive emulsion. You'll need your screen that's been degreased and the right size scoop coater. So having the right size scoop coater means you'll be able to easily coat your screen with a photosensitive emulsion. Your scoop coater should be at least half an inch to an inch away from your frame. So as you can see here, it has a gap between the emulsion and the frame. That's okay. That will be replaced with tape later. So it's better to have a smaller scoop coater than too large of a scoop coater like here. As you can see, it doesn't even fit within the frame, and here it overlaps. The screen's tension varies, and it's tighter closer to the frame than actually at the center. So what's going to happen is you're going to get an uneven coat, and you might even pop your screen. With a smaller scoop coater like here, you can actually push against the mesh and get a nice even coat. In some circumstances, you might have too small of a scoop coater for your screen, but that's okay. You can always double your layer. It works fine. but it's always appropriate to get the right size scoop coater for your screen, especially if you have several of the same size screen. So your next step will be to add your emulsion to your selected scoop coater. So carefully pour out the emulsion and let it sit until it's nice and level. Be sure to do this in a spot that you can clean up quite easily. Once you've poured your emulsion in the scoop coater, clean the side so that it doesn't drip everywhere. What I usually do is I keep the bucket over top of the scoop coater so it just drips back into the emulsion. And then carefully clean the bucket to get rid of all that emulsion so that you can put the top on and it won't stick. Here's another view of the scoop coater. As you can see, you should at least fill the scoop coater to about half of its capacity. Now, if you're only shooting one screen, it might feel like a waste to use so much, but you have to get a nice even coat. So it's more efficient to batch your screens together and coat them all at once instead of just doing one at a time. So it's important to keep that in mind. The scoop coater has two edges, a sharp and a rounded. We'll be using the sharp edge to coat our screens. So coating the screen. This is one of the hardest parts of screen printing because it takes a lot of muscle movement and coordination. So be patient with yourself as you try to learn this step. It's going to take several screens to get it down. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of practice. It can be done by yourself, but there's also ways you can do it with a partner. This tutorial will just feature the solo act, but I will have another video that accompanies this that goes more extensively into the whole process. Start with the print side of the screen and place it on the ground. Hold the scoop coater with your dominant hand and place your other hand at the top. Tilt it forward until all of the emulsion hits your screen and pull it up. Try to keep it straight and stop about an inch short of the frame. Push your screen towards your trough until all the emulsion slides back into your scoop coater, and then shimmy your scoop coater back and forth and release. The shimmy is going to allow for the emulsion to flow back into the scoop coater, creating a nice clean edge. Turn the screen to the ink side and repeat the step. It's important in this process to keep your scoop coater tight to the screen, almost pushing into the screen to allow for a nice even coat. Keep the scoop coater as level to the ground as possible to make sure you have the same amount of emulsion throughout your scoop coater. Turn your screen one more time to the print side and then rotate it 180 degrees. This will take care of any air bubbles that might have accumulated during this process and ensure you have a nice deposit of emulsion. This is the final time, so you should have done it 3 times, starting with the print side, going to the ink side, and then finishing with the print side. Like I said, this is one of the most difficult parts of screen printing. Don't get worried at this stage. Just use this to help guide you throughout the process. Lastly, clean up any extra residue on the sides from your scoop coater. This buildup of emulsion takes longer to dry, and if it doesn't dry thoroughly, it can actually become a problem when you're trying to expose your screen. I used a plastic card to help me clean, and then I set the screens in the dark room. As long as it's in a dark place, they will cure fine. Once you have finished, you can return all of your emulsion back into its container and clean your scoop coater. Carefully tilt your scoop coater until all of the emulsion flows back into its container. And use the plastic cards to collect any of the emulsion that's sticking and will make washing the scoop coater a lot easier. This is a new container here, so the emulsion is quite fresh, so I'm trying to save as much of that as possible. The older the emulsion gets, the harder it's going to be to save all the emulsion, but again, this is a new container here. Once I've finished scooping all that back into the container, I'll go ahead and clean everything. First is the rim of the bucket. I'll make sure that that's clean. If I don't clean it, the lid has a great chance of sticking to it and being hard to open in the future. Once you've wiped the edges, you can place the cap back on the emulsion and store it. Then you can take your plastic card and scoop coater to the washout booth. It's important that you clean both products thoroughly, especially the scoop coater. Any residue left on the screen could present some problems when coating the screen in the future. Start by using the garden hose and get it completely wet. You can actually get rid of most of the emulsion this way, but then take your sponge and start to remove all the emulsion, especially around the edges and on the inside corners. Scrub the entire scoop coater until you can't see any new emulsion. Once you've done that, wash it off and place it in its storage area to dry. Please do not leave it in the sink. And lastly, clean any of your tools really well. Usually the garden hose should take care of it, but you can use your sponge. And lastly, be sure to clean the sink of any emulsion. So once your screen has been coated and it has dried, it is now light sensitive. So be sure to do this in the dark room. Place your screen on a flat table, the frame side down. You have revealed the print side. What you're going to do is place your film front side down, so it should always be ink to emulsion. Remember, ink to emulsion. So when it's taped, it should read backwards like so. When our emulsion is exposed to light, it hardens. So our positives are actually blocking the light from hitting the emulsion. That emulsion that was blocked will actually wash away because the light didn't harden it, and your stencil will be created. So with your film lying face down, you're going to go ahead and tape all of your corners so that when it's flipped, your film will not be removed. What I do is I fold a tiny bit of tape over so you have a tab so that you can easily peel back your tape after it's been exposed. The film has been placed in the center of the screen and given about 2 to 3 inches between the films to allow for your squeegee. So keep that in mind. You don't want it too close to the frame. You're going to use an exposure unit to create your stencil. The light source is underneath the glass, and you're going to place your screen on top of the glass. So the first thing you're going to want to do is clean the glass of any residue, because anything on the glass could potentially block the light from hitting your screen and leave unwanted artwork. So take some glass cleaner, wipe it down. If there is a presence of a lot of emulsion, you're actually going to want to hit it with water first, and then a glass cleaner, and end with the isopropyl alcohol. The isopropyl alcohol evaporates quite quickly, and it will allow the glass to dry pretty fast. Once the glass is dry, you can now carefully lift the lid of the exposure unit. There are 2 clasps, those should be open. Gently place it on the glass, right in the center, and carefully close the exposure unit. Make sure you lock the clasps And now you're ready to expose. Push the switch on the front panel of the exposure unit and the screen will turn on. On the screen it will list two options, your vacuum time and your exposure time. Make sure the right settings are displayed. These settings may vary depending upon the emulsion and screen mesh you are using. Press A to start the process. So first, the vacuum is going to suck all of the air out of the unit and make sure you have good contact with your positive film and the emulsion on your screen. Having good contact means you will have a sharp image. Having poor contact means light is going to enter into the image area and create a blurry image. Once the vacuum has finished, the light source will be turned on and light will shine onto your screen. Wherever your positive image is, that will block the light from hitting, and only the negative area of your image will harden, again creating your stencil. Once complete, the unit will shut off, and go ahead and unlock the unit, but do not lift the lid yet. Allow for the air to escape. Give it about 10 seconds. As you can see here, if I try to lift it, I can't. Once the 10 seconds has elapsed, you should be able to carefully lift the lid, pull out the screen, close the lid, and shut off the machine. Place your screen back on your table in the dark room and gently peel all the tape off before taking your film. You can reuse this tape, but make sure that your tape is removed from the screen so you don't damage your film or your screen for the next use. Set your screen in the washout booth with the print side facing out. This is the strong side of the screen, the side that's hit the light, so you're going to do most of your washout on this side. It's important that you get the screen wet as soon as you can. You have about a 2-minute window before the light starts to make an impact on the screen and will start to damage your artwork. So remember, get it wet. As long as the screen's wet, it is not exposing. So take the garden hose and just hit both sides really quickly. Once both sides are wet, turn your water on and then your pressure washer on, and you can begin to wash out the screen. Be careful when using the pressure washer. It's very loud, so make sure to wear ear protection as well as prepare your stance when holding the gun. As soon as you pull the trigger, it's going to kick back and then it's going to take a little bit of strength to move the wand around. Keep the wand at least a foot to 2 feet away from your screen. Your goal is to wash out the entire emulsion area, not just the image area. By washing out the entire area, you take care of any residue emulsion that could make a huge impact in the printing process later. Once you've washed the entire surface, then you could focus in on the image area. And as you can see here, the image is washing out successfully, meaning our exposure time was right and our film was opaque. If our exposure time wasn't right, we would either see emulsion coming off or we wouldn't be seeing our artwork at all. The same for our opaque ink of our positive. If the ink wasn't opaque enough, light would have blasted right through it and we wouldn't see our artwork at all, just the emulsion. Flip the screen over and continue washing. This side is the ink side and it's the weaker side of the two, so don't use as much pressure here. Just aim to get all the excess emulsion off of this side of the screen. You're going to want to wash both sides. Once you feel like your image is complete, you can take your screen and compare it with the light. Using the light will allow you to see if any extra emulsion is left in your screen. If there is, go ahead and wash it. If there isn't, you can go ahead and set it to dry for at least 60 minutes. Here's the second washout at a different angle, just so you can see the process again. using the garden hose, get both sides wet. This allows you to work quickly. Once both sides are wet, then you can slow down and make sure your image appears and that you don't leave any emulsion residue. Wash the entire screen, both print side and ink side. Don't just focus on the image area. As you can see, the image starts to appear rather quickly. This is a good sign, meaning a good exposure time. And our emulsion is fresh and hasn't expired. A few complications that arise during this process is the image not exposing or taking quite a bit of time to wash out. If this is the case, check a few things. Obviously, check your exposure time and check your film, but if that's working, check your emulsion. If it's been over 3 to 6 months, the emulsion might have expired. It has a shelf life of about 3 to 6 months. So if that happens, you'll have to replace it with a new batch. As you can see, when I go to the ink side, I go right to the garden hose if I want to, because all I'm doing here is cleaning this of any residue emulsion. Most of your washout should happen on the print side, the side that's stronger, that hit the light. Make sure to get rid of any soap suds that appear. That's what I'm doing here. And then when you're ready, you can place it in a spot to dry. Be sure to dry the screens for at least 60 minutes. It's easy to want to start printing right away, but let them sit. Take a break, organize yourself, and then once the 60 minutes has passed, you can start with the next stage. If necessary, you might need to clean up your screen. Occasionally pinholes appear or unwanted exposures happen. Take your plastic card and squeegee a small amount of emulsion onto the screen and take away the excess so it doesn't create a raised surface. You can even use a brush if you want, but I like the card because it keeps it really thin. Again, you don't want to go too thick here, just enough to cover up the spot. Now, if you do patch up the screen, you'll need to allow it time to dry, at least 30 to 60 minutes. To be on the safe side, do this the day before printing. That way it has 24 hours to cure and it'll be ready to print. The last thing you can do is what we call a post-expose. Take your screen and place it in the exposure unit and let it expose again. What this does is it hardens all of that emulsion and just gives it a little bit more defense so that in the printing process it doesn't break down. This is great for lengthy print processes of runs from 50 to 100 impressions or so forth. Don't forget to clean up after yourself. And that wraps up this tutorial.